It never really is a safe time to pre-record a daily podcast on the New York Mets right now because Billy Epler, Steve Cohen, and company just keep on making moves. Before we get into the meat of the show today, which is a more macro look at what the Mets are now that they have acquired Carlos Correa and this new status they have as a franchise, they made a trade. So I want to address it because I spoke as if James McCann was still going to be on the roster during this show. He is not. They have traded James McCann to the Baltimore Orioles in exchange for a player to be named later. They ate $19 million of the $24 million owed to James McCann, so only $5 million going to the Baltimore Orioles. They get a backup catcher at a reasonable cost. Makes sense for them. Get someone to back up Adley Rutschman, rookie standout who was a top 5 catcher in baseball this year, arguably. And now you bring in a veteran who can help kind of show him the ropes a little bit and can, take a load off him so Rutschman could DH a little bit and McCann can play against left-handed pitching. But regardless, from the Mets' perspective, you sign Omar Narvaez, you clear McCann out of there. Now you have Narvaez-Nido platoon to start the season. Francisco Alvarez can take his time developing. One of the great things that we've seen about this Mets franchise, with all the moves they made this offseason, they have allowed their prospects time to develop. Alvarez can now learn how to be a catcher in Syracuse this year. When he's ready to actually catch, they can promote him. Brett Baty, they just brought in Carlos Correa. No pressure to be the starting third baseman on opening day. He's now going to probably transition to left field, and I could see him supplanting Mark Canha at some point, which I discuss on the full episode you're about to listen to. So I cannot complain at all about this one. Nice move. Get him off the books. Clear roster spot. One more roster spot has to be cleared for the Mets to get down to 40 before they can make the Correa and the Narvaez signings official. But Billy Epler doing good work. Now let's get to the regularly scheduled program, the podcast I had recorded already, discussing how Steve Cohen has started a new evil empire in New York.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're listening to Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Locked On Mets is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Guess what, Mets fans? Carlos Correa is your starting third baseman. I know we discussed it on the emergency episode, but it is just so much fun to say. On the show today, I will be discussing what this means for the Mets franchise because they've been trending in this direction for a while with Steve Cohen spending, and it's officially happened. The New York Mets are the new evil empire in New York. I'm going to get into that throughout the show. Before we do, I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor and where I wrote an article that is titled the same as today's podcast. With Carlos Correa, the Mets have become the new evil empire. And I'm a Star Wars fan. I don't know how many of you are as well. I grew up, and I know people aren't going to like this, but born in 95, I grew up on the new trilogy, and then I got back into the old trilogy. I've seen all the movies, all the shows. I love it all. But as someone who did grow up, in the first Star Wars movie I saw in cinema was The Phantom Menace. I know, not the best one, but that trilogy always is my favorite in a way because it's my childhood. And I look at what happened last night, and to me, there is some similarities to the arc of a Senator Palpatine in the Star Wars trilogy as to what we're seeing with Steve Cohen. Now, for those of you who aren't Star Wars nerds like me, this is the Emperor. The guy that in the original trilogy, all you know him as is the Emperor, the guy that Darth Vader reports to, right, so to speak. Well, in the prequel trilogy, you see his sort of rise into power. And in the first movie, you have this guy that, he's He's a little mild-mannered. You don't really see him, making too many waves. He's just kind of plodding along. But in the background, what we know is there was a lot more behind the scenes because he was controlling things as the Sith Lord. Then you get to the second movie, starts to get a little bit more power, starts to have this political hold, and he takes over things. All right, well, now he's starting to get there. Let's look at the first 2 years for the Mets, right? It's kind of a symbiotic relationship here. You're seeing some similarities, is what I'm trying to say. First year, Steve Cohen comes in. He makes some moves, but doesn't make waves. He's just happy to be there. He gets approved by the other owners. He makes a trades some prospects to get Francisco Lindor, signs him to the big contract. No one bats an eye. Other than that, wasn't any other crazy moves, right? Year 2, while the payroll jumps, second highest in baseball, not the highest, came behind the Dodgers, in the same neighborhood as the Yankees, the Phillies. $268 million, signs Max Scherzer to the richest contract ever when it comes to average annual value for a pitcher, $43.3 million. Amazing, right? But not going all the way in. This year is, I'm here. I'm the new emperor. I am the new, big man on the block with all the cash, and I don't care about your Steve Cohen tax. I am going to spend. And the offseason starts off with the Justin Verlander signing. He's getting his ducks in a row. And I equate the Carlos Correa signing to turning Anakin Skywalker into Darth Vader and bringing him to the dark side. Because and not necessarily that Carlos Correa is now the best player on the Mets, but more that it signifies that full-on switch where the Mets go from lovable loser to a team on the upswing to now they're arrived. This is a franchise that is going to spend big, that is going to compete every single year, that is pouring money into every single facet of their organization, trying to build the Death Star, and you hope there's not that flaw in the system that ends up bouncing them in October. But this is a team that isn't going anywhere. Okay? Steve Cohen's money is going to continue to trickle through this team, and it's going to get more self-sufficient. Things are going to keep on getting to the point where it's not as expensive as it is right now. But when he comes out here and you have this slight window where he smells that blood in the water, where Carlos Correa, who is no longer a free agent, becomes a free agent again because there's some blip in the medicals, and the Giants are a little wary, 13-year deal. Steve Cohen says, I don't care. I don't care what years 7 through 12 look like. Give me Carlos Correa in my lineup in 2023. He looked at the free agent landscape and he saw Michael Conforto left. And he saw, Brandon Drury came out the board too. He saw, you're left with Trey Mancini and Michael Conforto. And you're looking at the trade market and you're thinking, I might have to give up Alvarez or Beatty to bring another bat in. And one of those guys could be a bat that helps us this year. I don't want to do that. All of a sudden, the opportunity arises to swoop in and grab Carlos Correa, and he does. And everyone around baseball who's not a Mets fan cannot love this. Everyone can say, yeah, we love to see owners spend, we love to see owners spend, we love to see owners spend. Not $500 million, okay? Other owners are livid right now, and it's going to be tough to make trades. And I think that part of this is knowing that mid-season, good luck making an upgrade. The New York Mets, I said it after they signed Adam Ottavino, they didn't have to do anything else. They didn't. Their starting rotation, revamped, locked in. Adam Ottavino comes back into the fold, your bullpen looking good. Maybe you make a trade for Liam Hendricks. We'll probably discuss that tomorrow, unless the trade happens. You have to make little moves around the edges. Maybe you sign Conforto, maybe you sign Duvall, but you're bringing back, when you re-sign Nimmo, an offense that was top 5 in runs scored and top 4. They were the 4th best team in weighted runs created plus, which again measures based on a league average of 100. So as far as teams are concerned, the 4th best offense in baseball. You bring the whole team back with the prospects coming up, and the Mets might have been okay. But Steve Cohen does not leave things to chance. The Emperor does not leave things to, play out and wait and see. Could he have taken control of the galaxy without Darth Vader? Maybe. But it's a lot easier when you have him. It's a lot easier to take control of the National League East when you got Carlos Correa playing third base next to Francisco Lindor. And to have two players who are making over $300 million in the life of their contract, was it 660? No, that would have been too good. $656 million. Couldn't we have given him an extra 10? Couldn't we have given Correa $325 so the numbers make out so it's 666? But it's just, man, it's crazy. It's crazy that the money that he spent, and we can go to the rotation with it too. And there's more from this article that I want to discuss here. Before we get into it, though, today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all of your sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer and esports. They've got it all at BetOnline.net. If you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. BetOnline is always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. You might not even be able to see the Mets odds to win the World Series. They're still computing it. Maybe as you are listening to this show, they have it up. So check out BetOnline.net if you want to bet on the Mets to win the World Series, win the pennant. Those odds keep on shrinking. We should have jumped on it earlier this offseason. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Going through my article here from justbaseball.com, again, a lot of Star Wars in it, but, the sentiment is pretty clear here, and that's just, the Mets did not leave anything to chance this offseason. And the spending, while a lot, it was, as I described in the article, surgical spending. If you look at these deals, this is the only one outside of Brandon Nimmo, Edwin Diaz, who are your guys, and Kodai Senga, who figure to be on the books beyond 2025. Kodai Senga could opt out after the 2025 season. Starling Marte, that's his final year of his deal. And for Senga, that contract came in below what we sort of thought the market value was. So that's a good deal. Diaz and Nimmo were your guys anyway. And all the other contracts, Verlander, Robertson, Ottavino, Narvaez, Rayleigh coming over in a trade, what he was still owed as far as years. All short term. The Mets did not want to touch their farm system, and they want to build a winner that's a little more sustainable. I don't think Steve Cohen wants to just always be known as the guy that has to buy his championships. Because there's some ego in that too. You also want to be able to be like, wow, I was able to get it done on a $260 million payroll because the prospects started to come through. But he can't wait on that. So they make all of the right little moves to put their team in a position to win. And again, they could have stuck with where they were at. They did not have to take this next step. But he wanted to add a bat. And as you're scanning the market, when this one guy comes up, you say, you know what, we're doing it. It's 12 years. You worry again about years 7 through 12 later. You think about that first 6. That first half of the contract. You want to win now. This guy's 28 years old. You're getting his age 28 to 34 seasons, and obviously beyond that. But that's the window to win it all when you have Francisco Lindor in a similar age. Those two guys who we've seen play brilliant defense together in the World Baseball Classic years ago, and they weren't even as good of players as they are right now. You pair them on that side of the infield. Lindor put up a 6.8 F-WAR this season. He returned to being the best shortstop in baseball. Carlos Correa in 2021 was the best defensive shortstop in baseball, and over the last 2 years, he has put up monster offensive seasons, getting on base at over a 360 clip, hitting 20-plus home runs each year, having the weighted runs created plus at 133, then 140. Dynamic offensive weapon. The Mets have so many ways that they can move their lineup now. This is what it feels like to have been the Yankees of old. The ones that went out, and who did they get? Oh, Alex Rodriguez. They had Derek Jeter. They didn't need a shortstop. They got Rodriguez, and they put him at third. It's very similar. The only difference, Francisco Lindor is actually a good shortstop, unlike Derek Jeter. So you had Jeter, who was there because of the pedigree and the captain and all that stuff. Francisco Lindor does not have the long tenure with the Mets where he's owed shortstop. He's given it because he's the best defensive shortstop on this team, even with Correa coming over, and also because Correa has an absolute cannon and should translate incredibly well to third base. Is he going to be able to knock off Nolan Arenado for the Gold Glove? I don't know, but he could probably compete for it. You seen how good Manny Machado, a converted shortstop, is at third base? I think Correa is going to be just as good over there, and he's just going to get better and better year over year at the position. For the longest time, people have said Carlos Correa probably grows out of shortstop. Actually, I think I saw a video today. Jacob Resnick, you should definitely follow him on Twitter. Worst for SNY now, used to come up through Mets Merized. He tweeted out a video from spring training, I think it was 2013, where I believe it was Gary Cohen said, Carlos Correa probably might grow out of shortstop, and Resnick tweeted out, not the way that we thought he grew out of it. He won a platinum glove at the position, proved he could play at the big league level, and now grows out of it because he gets to play next to one of his best friends and a multiple-time Gold Glove winner himself in Francisco Lindor. So your defense is great. You add the pop you want into your lineup. There's really no one left on the market that was going to give you more juice in the middle of that lineup when it comes to free agency than a Correa. And everyone's going to hate the Mets now. And relish it, Mets fans. Relish it. It's fine. And you know what? People want to say the Mets are buying a championship, as I put in the article. That's the narrative. That's also the reality. Yes, Steve Cohen is trying to buy us a championship. Enjoy the ride, Mets fans. Enjoy it. Absolutely enjoy it, because there's not a baseball fan on earth that does not wish they were sitting in your seat right now. That's including Yankees fans, although they'll never admit it. That's including Braves fans, although they would never admit it. They'll say, we got our homegrown guys if you're the Braves. The Yankees, we got Judge. We got Rodon. You also got Josh Donaldson playing third base. The Mets have Carlos freaking Correa. The Braves still got Marcell Ozuna playing a significant role. Not to say the Mets are definitely going to be better. You still got to play the baseball games. But what you do know with Steve Cohen, this team's never rebuilding. There's never a window where they're going to tank or they're going to go down. There might be a year that's bad, and boy will he respond if there is. Steve Cohen played nice the first couple years. He did. Didn't make the biggest of waves. This is his FU offseason. This is his, I guaranteed, even though he didn't quite guarantee, I would love to win 1 in 3 to 5 years. He all but insinuated that the Mets will win a World Series in his first 3 to 5 years of ownership. We're entering year 3. So this was the time to go. And they had an opportunity to grab Carlos Correa. And boy, did he jump all over it. Now, you are in this envious position where you sit back, you look 1 through 9, the lineup looks perfect. You look at the starting rotation, look at the bullpen, all the right pieces are in place. You're just adding to the roster, you're smoothing it out. Billy Epler can now just try to put the puzzle pieces exactly the way he wants it, but the puzzle's there, it's laid out. You just got to make sure that everything fits exactly where you want it, and that's what I'm going to discuss next. What's left? What is left for real? We'll get to that, but first, today's episode is brought to you by the NHTSA. Did you know that driving high is considered driving under the influence? That's right. Driving under the influence of marijuana is against the law in every single state, even the states where marijuana is legal. That means driving high could get you a DUI. And if you think law enforcement officers can't tell when you're driving high, you're wrong. Your friends can tell, your coworkers can tell, even your parents can tell, everyone can tell. So what makes you think a law enforcement officer isn't going to be able to tell when you're driving high? Driving under the influence of marijuana can slow your response time and change how you perceive time and speed. So even if you think you're fine to drive when you're high, you're not. Bottom line, if you feel different, you drive different. And driving high is driving under the influence. So remember, drive high, get a DUI. Looking at where the Mets are at post Carlos Correa. Well, we know the infield. I at 4:30 in the morning tweeted out it's the best infield ever created. Now people hit me with the big red machine infield, the Yankees from '09. Look, guys, I was being hyperbolic. I thought it was implied when I said, I don't know if I'm exaggerating here at 4:30 in the morning, but the Mets just created the greatest infield ever. They have to win to become that. Are they the best infield in baseball right now? That I think they are. Somebody came out with the Cardinals. Get out of here. Brendan Donovan and Tommy Edman. Those are your 2 weak links. All right. Well, Jeff McNeil's a batting champion, and Pete Alonso, led the league in RBIs and hit 40 bombs. Has the most home runs in baseball since he debuted in 2019. Or Correa is your weak link. The guy you just signed for $315 million. So, the infield's locked in. The outfield, very interesting. You still need a fourth outfielder, technically. Jeff McNeil can kind of be that guy if you really believe that Cannon and Marte can still play center. Theoretically, you don't have to if you wanted to break camp with Brett Beatty, but that's the big thing to me. Another thing I tweeted out, which I mentioned on the show too, early in the morning on the Correa pod, Brett Beatty's a left fielder now. Throw out that third base glove. You're not playing third. So Beatty's in left, and I think he's going to really take to the position with more repetition. You can have him out there all of spring training, really get him reps. If he earns a job, he could be your starting left fielder. That's how good this guy could be. Or he could be in the Tyler Naquin-esque role, although maybe not playing all the positions that Naquin did. But Canna can maybe give you the positional flexibility as your pseudo fourth outfielder who still gets a lot of time. You can protect Beatty from lefties and have him be your starting left fielder. I think that's going to be the net result. If not opening day, by May or June, I'd be surprised if Brett Beatty does not become the starting left fielder of the New York Mets, which is why you really don't have to go out and add a Conforto at this juncture, even though if they did, I'd love it because everyone knows the type of Conforto fan I am, but that's not required at this point. Now, would it be nice to get an Adam Duvall or something and trade a rough on the roster for Duvall? Yeah, but then you're getting greedy. The Mets can be greedy, and they might continue to. But we'll see. The fourth outfielder situation could just be a Travis Jankowski type at this stage. We'll find out what the Mets do. The big question is, are they going to trade for Liam Hendricks? And I think that might be something that we see materialize because is there a team in baseball that fits James McCann more than the Chicago White Sox, the one place where he's had success in his big league career? Kind of fits, doesn't it? If they want to get salary relief off of Hendricks, taking on James McCann's salary isn't great, but Steve Cohen can eat as much of it as he has to get a deal done. Money's no object. And maybe it's just money for this year. Maybe you only eat a portion of his salary next year and eat a larger portion of it this year. Could the White Sox want an Eduardo Escobar? They're trying to win. That's the thing. For a James McCann, you kind of want a team that's actually trying to win something. So, if they got McCann and Eduardo Escobar, and then you throw in a Ronnie Mauricio type prospect, that might move the needle. I know Mark Vientos would probably be the prospect that fans would most want to trade for Liam Hendricks. They just have so many no defense, all offense guys. I don't know if they would want a Vientos, the White Sox. So that's why I think that they might be like, ooh, Mauricio's upside, Dominican League MVP. I could see it. And if you say, I can't believe we're trading Ronnie Mauricio, look, you got Correa and Lindor. So if you hang on to Beatty, you hang on to Vientos, you hang on to Alvarez, and you have to trade Mauricio, and you get another freaking closer to slot into that bullpen, make it a super pen, that's enticing. Ruff and Vogelback, where do they stand on this roster? The Mets have a 42-man roster right now, but you can only have 40. So they got to cut a couple of guys, and I think they're trying to make trades. Are other teams gonna work with them right now? Are they going to wait? I don't know about that because I think that there's going to be some owners that want no part of trading with the Mets. But if you're trying to win and you haven't been able to land a free agent this year, and the Mets offer you Eduardo Escobar, what is it, like $10 million, I think, around there? Might be a little bit north of that. Who could be your starting third baseman and could potentially hit you 25 bombs. There's teams that'll listen. And so the Mets have that luxury. They could trade Louis Guillorme. I love Guillorme. I think that Buck Showalter loves Guillorme on his team. But you could move him right now because who's your backup shortstop? I'm trying to think. You have Francisco Lindor's the starter. And then you have, Carlos Correa. Now your backup shortstop. Very similar to when Lindor went down, around the trade deadline. They had picked up Javi Baez, and Javi Baez became your starting shortstop until Lindor got back into the fold. So they have that luxury now. I'm very interested to see what trades the Mets make. I think that's really the next route. I outside of an Adam Duvall or an AJ Pollock to try to get someone that can be that center field fourth outfielder type option, maybe to give you another right-handed bat, although you just got a pretty freaking big one. I think free agency could be closed. Crazy. And with Cohen, I wouldn't count him out for anything. But I think trades are the next motive of operation here to try to make all these pieces fit a little bit better. And the one thing I'll say too, you can now roll with Eduardo Escobar and Daniel Vogelbach as your DHs, and you can just cut a rough or find a trade partner where you just dump him for a player to be named later. You could clear Vogelbach, have Eduardo Escobar be your DH, and give Mark Vientos an opportunity to earn a spot to be the DH with no position, with Vogelbach out of the way. So the bench is now where the Mets have to focus, but the starting lineup locked in. And I want to read it off one last time before we close the show here. We discussed the rotation, the bullpen, and maybe we'll get to the Hendricks thing a little more tomorrow. Potential starting lineup on opening day right now before Christmas. You got Brandon Nimmo, Francisco Lindor, Carlos Correa, Pete Alonso, Jeff McNeil. You can flip those five any way you want them. Starling Marte is now your sixth hitter. I know he batted second this year. And look, if the Mets wanted to, maybe. I just don't like the idea of Correa or McNeil not batting in the top five. So that's your six. That's an amazing six. And if they lock up Alonso and McNeil, that could be your core for the next 3 seasons. And then when Marte moves on, that could be your core 5 for maybe the next 6 or 7. I love that. Beyond that, for now it's Canna, but I think it'll be Beatty. I think Brett Beatty will eventually become the starting left fielder of the New York Mets and be batting like 7th. Alvarez could eventually become the catcher by the playoffs, but for now you got Narvaez, Nito as the platoon. I'm assuming McCann gets traded. And then, if Beatty was your left fielder, like Mark Canna's your DH, or maybe Beatty's your DH and Canna's still playing left, this roster is loaded. Because that doesn't even factor Eduardo Escobar in the mix, where he could be your DH. Or Vogelbach could be your DH. Escobar could be on the bench. Hell, Escobar and Canna could both be on the bench next season. 2 guys that you signed last offseason to be starters. And it could be Beatty and Vogelbach in there with your catcher. They have so many options for that bottom third of the lineup that are interesting, but it's the top 6 that makes this a absolute, no doubt about it, World Series favorite. Now, I'm not saying they're head and shoulders better than the Dodgers and the Braves. I think all 3 teams go into next season right around the same level, and we have to watch baseball and see the games start to play out before we can really decide who's the best of the 3. But to me, that's still the clear top of the National League, and the Astros join them as far as all of baseball, and the Yankees are kind of right there as well as maybe the top 5 teams in the game. But what an offseason for Steve Cohen, the new emperor, as he has constructed an evil empire that would make a George Steinbrenner proud. But Steinbrenner, he's not here anymore. Steve Cohen is. That's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. On the show tomorrow, Probably Liam Hendricks talk. But Cohen might give us another signing at 2 o'clock in the morning that'll blow us away. So we'll see what happens. Make sure you make this your first listen every day. And for your second listen, check out Locked On Sports Today, hosted by Peter Bukowski, Locked On Sports Today, where you want to go to stay up to date with everything going on around sports. You can follow Locked On Sports Today on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get podcasts.